The warning sirens screamed through the lonely human outpost, echoing across the Red Valley like the cry of a dying world. Above the planet, the sky burned with alien lights. Hundreds of warships circling slowly like predators around a wounded animal. Each ship shimmered with pale blue energy, ready to strike. The Galactic Council had finally come for Captain Mara Vance, the woman they called the last rebel of Earth. Inside the command room, the air smelled of ozone and fear. Holographic screens flickered, showing the same message again and again. Captain Mara Vance, this is the Council of Systems. A cold alien voice declared. You have 10 minutes to surrender your base, your weapons, and yourself. If you refuse, you and everyone here will be erased. The voice faded, leaving only silence, and the sound of the ticking clock on the wall. Her crew looked at her, waiting for orders. Lieutenant Rico Hale, her second in command, stepped forward. Captain, what do we do? He asked quietly. We can't fight that many ships. They'll level us before we can even blink. Mara didn't answer. Her gray eyes stayed fixed on the countdown screen. 9 minutes, 50 seconds. Then she exhaled slowly, as if the world's weight was lighter than it seemed. Without a word, she turned around and walked toward the door. Her soldiers stared in confusion as she entered the small kitchen beside the control deck. No one moved. They could hear the soft clink of metal and the hum of a machine. She's making coffee? Tara, the young engineer, whispered in disbelief. Rico blinked. That can't be real. But it was. While the alarms wailed, while the sky burned outside, Captain Mara calmly filled a mug, pressed the button, and waited. The steam rose like mist around her, glowing orange in the emergency lights. Her face was unreadable. Neither fear nor panic, just quiet focus. To most of her crew it looked like madness, but to Rico it felt like something else. He had served with her for 3 years. He knew the stories, that she never acted without reason, that she once saved a convoy by waiting until the last possible second. He remembered her words from months ago. War isn't always about speed, Lieutenant. Sometimes patience wins the galaxy. Now she was proving it. The alien voice returned, sharper this time. 9 minutes remaining. The sound of it made some soldiers flinch. Mara didn't even blink. She stirred her coffee slowly, then tapped her wrist pad twice. No one noticed that her screen showed a string of codes, old Earth encryption protocols. Buried signals began to ripple out from the base, crawling through space like ghosts. Miles away, deep beneath the crust of the planet, ancient machines hummed to life for the first time in decades. Rico stepped closer, trying to speak. Captain, are you doing something? Or are we just waiting to die? She took a sip, looked at him with a faint smile. Patience, Lieutenant, she said softly. The universe is full of surprises. Outside, the alien fleet grew restless. From the command ship, the Grand Arbiter of the Council watched her through surveillance feeds. He had seen humans do foolish things before, but never this. She is drinking? He hissed. At the edge of extinction, and she drinks? His advisors laughed. Humans are emotional creatures, my lord. They hide fear with foolishness. But the Arbiter didn't laugh. He had fought humans before, and he knew, when they looked calm, that was when they were most dangerous. 8 minutes. The voice echoed again. Inside the base, tension grew like a storm. Tara covered her ears. Why isn't she doing anything? We're doomed. Quiet, Rico snapped, his eyes never leaving the captain. He noticed that every time the alien voice spoke, Mara's fingers moved across her wrist pad in perfect rhythm with the countdown. It wasn't random. She was syncing something, waiting for alignment. He didn't know what, but the realization made his heart beat faster. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. 7 minutes. The coffee machine clicked off, the mug now full and steaming. Mara lifted it gently, walked back to the command chair, and sat down. Her boots clinked against the floor as she crossed her legs. Relaxed. Rico couldn't take it anymore. Captain, please. At least tell me what's happening. She looked at him for a long second, then smiled faintly. "Do you know what happens when you heat coffee at high altitude?" she asked. Rico blinked. "What?" "It boils faster," she said, her eyes glinting. "And sometimes it explodes." The crew exchanged confused looks. Outside, the alien warships adjusted their aim. Energy cannons began to glow bright white, gathering power. The entire valley lit up like a second sun. 6 minutes. The alien voice warned. Mara didn't look up. She only said, "Good. Right on time." Then she whispered to her wrist pad, "Phoenix Network. Stand by." The computer beeped softly. A signal pulsed through the atmosphere, weak, almost invisible, but far beyond the orbit. Old human satellites caught it, reawakened by her code. They were relics from forgotten wars, machines that still dreamed of duty, and one by one, they began to turn their long-dead sensors toward the alien fleet. Inside the base, no one spoke. They could feel the hum in the air, a vibration deep in the bones of the planet. Rico's hands shook as he looked at the captain's calm expression. 5 minutes. The alien voice repeated again. Mara's lips curved into a small smile. 5 minutes? She echoed quietly. That's all I need. She raised the mug and took one last sip. The warmth of the drink reflected in her eyes. Then she set it down beside her console. The moment stretched in silence. The universe seemed to hold its breath. And for the first time, Rico understood. She wasn't waiting to surrender. She was waiting for the right second to strike. As the countdown continued to echo through the burning sky, Captain Mara Vance sat surrounded by fear, calm as a storm before the rain. Her crew still didn't know the plan. The aliens thought she was insane, but she knew the truth. The longer they watched her, the closer their doom came. And as the clock hit 4 minutes, a tiny light on her console blinked green. Her whisper broke the silence, soft and dangerous. "Good morning, Phoenix," she said, "and welcome back to the war." The red horizon burned like an open wound. Alien ships floated above the planet's surface, huge and silent, their shadows crawling across the ground like monsters from another world. Inside the human base, Captain Mara Vance sat quietly in her command chair, one hand resting beside her empty coffee mug. Her eyes didn't blink. Her breathing was steady. It looked like peace, but everyone in the room knew it was the kind of peace that comes before destruction. Her crew stood around her, waiting for something, anything. No one understood why she wasn't giving attack orders or calling for backup. The communication lines were jammed, the defense cannons were useless, and escape was impossible. The aliens above could end them with a single command. Yet their captain sat there, calm, patient, unbroken. Lieutenant Rico Hale stood beside her, arms crossed, his jaw tight with worry. He had seen Mara in battle before. She had survived things no one else could, but this was different. Even for her, this was madness. "Captain," he said softly, trying not to sound afraid, "the Council fleet is charging weapons again, if we don't do something." She cut him off, her voice steady as stone. "Do you trust me, Rico?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "With my life." "Then hold the line," she said, "and do nothing until I say otherwise." Around them, the base trembled slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling, the hum of alien energy pulsing outside. The alien voice came again, cold and sharp, "4 minutes remaining." The words echoed through the hall like the toll of a bell. Tara, the young engineer, pressed her hands against her ears. "This is insane," she cried. "We're sitting here waiting to die." Mara looked at her quietly. "Sometimes waiting is the only way to win," she said simply. No one dared to speak again. The tension was a living thing, heavy in the air. The only sound was the soft ticking of the countdown clock on the screen. Rico moved closer to the radar monitor, eyes narrowing. Something strange was happening out there. Tiny signals flickering far in orbit, too weak to be detected by alien sensors. He frowned. "Captain, are those human transmissions?" Mara didn't look up. She just said, Old ghosts still know their way home. Far above them, in the black silence of space, a dozen forgotten satellites turned, rusty, cracked, and half dead, but still alive. They aligned slowly, piece by piece, like stars rearranging themselves. Energy readings began to pulse, faint but growing stronger, each one linked to another, forming a pattern that no alien system could read. The Council scanners showed nothing but static. To them, it looked like a dead zone. But to Mara, it was a loaded weapon waking from its long sleep. 3 minutes. The alien voice announced. On the Council's flagship, the Grand Arbiter stood tall before a huge screen. He could see the human base glowing in the dust below. "She ignores our warning," he growled. "She insults the Council with silence." One of his lieutenants laughed softly. "Humans are dramatic, my lord. They always pretend to be fearless." The Arbiter's golden eyes narrowed. "Pretend?" he whispered. "No. The dangerous ones don't pretend. They wait." Down on the surface, Rico stared at the captain again. He noticed her fingers tapping against the armrest in perfect rhythm. Each tap matched the clock's second hand. It wasn't random. She was counting something, timing it perfectly. "Captain," he said carefully, "whatever you're planning, it's almost time, isn't it?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, Lieutenant." The calm before the fire. The lights flickered across the base as energy levels spiked underground. Power lines that had been dead for years suddenly hummed. The ground itself seemed to wake, rumbling softly. Deep in the mountains beyond the outpost, steel doors cracked open, revealing ancient launch tunnels. Inside, the sleeping remains of Project Phoenix began to stir. Long-lost human weapons, designed during the First Galactic War, now powered up one by one. Rico watched the readings on his monitor jump wildly. "Captain, the energy surge. It's coming from below us." Mara nodded slowly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly. He stared at her, half in awe, half in fear. You knew these systems were still active?" She looked out the window at the alien fleet glowing in the sky. "Let's just say I like keeping a few old friends close." 2 minutes. The alien voice boomed again. This time it wasn't calm. It sounded angry. The alien commanders could feel something was wrong. They began to move ships back, scanning the surface more aggressively. But the energy patterns were buried deep, masked beneath natural radiation. They couldn't see what was coming. Inside the base, the crew began to sense it. The faint hum through the floor plates, the smell of ozone, the soft vibration in the air. Tara whispered, "What's happening?" Rico whispered back, "Hope." Mara stood up slowly, picking up her mug again. There was no coffee left, but she held it like a symbol of calm. Her uniform was dusty, her hair slightly out of place, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. She stepped to the center of the command deck and said, "When this is over, the galaxy will remember that humans don't surrender." Rico felt his throat tighten. He didn't know if they were about to die or witness a miracle, but something inside him shifted. Fear turned into faith, because in that moment, he realized she wasn't calm because she was fearless. She was calm because she had already decided how the story would end. 60 seconds. The alien voice said again. Outside, the warships glowed brighter, charging for the final strike. Inside, the base lights dimmed, replaced by a soft red glow. Mara lifted her wrist pad and whispered, "Phoenix Protocol. Prepare ignition." A deep rumble shook the earth. The walls trembled, dust rained from the ceiling, and distant booms echoed like thunder. Rico's voice cracked. "Captain, it's starting, isn't it?" She looked at him and nodded. "The fire always starts in silence," she said. Then, as the countdown hit the final mark, the alien voice screamed, 30 seconds to annihilation." Mara smiled, calm, fearless, unbroken. "Let them come," she whispered. "They've already lost." High above the red planet, the alien warships floated like steel gods, Their massive shadows darkened the desert below, turning daylight into dusk. Inside the grand flagship of the Galactic Council, the air was cold and quiet. Hundreds of alien officers stood before glowing screens. Each display showed a live feed of the human base. Small, broken, and still, at its center, one tiny human sat in a chair, sipping from a mug. The Grand Arbiter, ruler of the Council fleet, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His tall silver form gleamed in the blue light, his golden eyes narrow and sharp. "So," he said slowly, "this is the human who defies us." His voice was calm, but underneath it burned irritation and curiosity. Beside him, a lower officer chuckled softly. "She looks harmless, my lord," he said. "She hasn't even raised her defenses." The Arbiter turned his head, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Harmless?" he repeated. "No creature that calm under death is harmless." On the screen, Captain Mara Vance looked perfectly relaxed. Her mug sat beside her hand, her expression unreadable. The alien cameras zoomed in closer, focusing on her face. Every twitch, every blink, every tiny movement was analyzed by advanced scanners. They found no fear, no panic, only silence and stillness. To the Council, that silence was unnerving. To humans, it was strategy. 3 minutes remaining. The ship's system announced. The Arbiter folded his arms. "Has she sent any transmissions?" he asked. "None, my lord," replied an officer. "We jammed all frequencies." "Then how is she so calm?" the Arbiter murmured. He leaned closer to the screen, studying her like a puzzle. Something about the woman's eyes bothered him. They looked like someone who had already seen the end and made peace with it. He turned away and walked toward the observation window. Through the glass, he could see his entire armada, thousands of ships in formation, each one a masterpiece of technology, each one armed with weapons that could destroy continents. And yet, one human woman refused to kneel before it. "She will make an example," he said coldly. "When the timer reaches 0, fire all cannons." The officers nodded, but deep down, a small voice inside the Arbiter whispered something dangerous. "What if she knows something you don't?" Meanwhile, down on the planet, the air inside the human base was thick with tension. The lights flickered again as old systems roared to life underground. The floor trembled softly under their feet. Lieutenant Rico Hale stood near the window, staring at the alien fleet above. He could see their bright engines glowing like stars. Every instinct told him they were moments from death. But then he looked at Mara and felt something else. Calm, unshakable, fearless. "Captain," he said quietly, "they're watching us." "I know," she replied. Her eyes stayed fixed on her screen. "They're expecting fear, panic, chaos, but they'll see patience instead." Rico frowned. "They're not afraid of us." Mara smiled faintly. "They will be." The alien voice boomed again through the speakers. 2 minutes remaining. "This is your final warning. Surrender now." The words made everyone in the room freeze. Mara didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, "Phoenix, begin alignment." Her wristpad glowed faint blue. On the radar, faint signals began appearing. Tiny dots across orbit, moving in a perfect circle. To the crew, they looked like small blips, meaningless noise. To Mara, they were hope. The alien surveillance picked up the movement. Unidentified signals detected near the asteroid belt. An officer reported. The Arbiter's head snapped toward him. "Are they ships?" "No, my lord. They appear to be debris." The Arbiter frowned. "Debris does not move in perfect formation," he hissed. He turned back to the main screen. "Enhance the feed," he ordered. The image shifted, zooming on the orbiting debris field. At first it looked harmless, just old human satellites. Broken, rusted, drifting silently for years. But now, they were moving together, glowing faintly. One by one, they aligned, connecting invisible energy threads between them. A network began to form. The Arbiter's eyes widened. "What is she doing?" he demanded. No one answered, because no one knew. Back in the base, Mara's fingers danced across her controls, her voice calm. Power routes confirmed. Phoenix grid online. Sequence locked. Rico stared at her in disbelief. "Captain, you hid this? All this time?" She didn't look up. "I didn't hide it, Lieutenant. I was waiting for the right audience." He blinked. "Who?" She glanced toward the sky. "The Council." The countdown on the alien flagship hit 1 minute. The Arbiter's voice grew cold. "Enough," he said. "Prepare to fire. End this human foolishness." Energy gathered across the fleet, bright blue light flooding the bridge. The officers began final target locks. And then, every ship's system blinked. The lights dimmed, sensors flickered. The energy charge dropped to 0. "What's happening?" an officer shouted. The Arbiter's voice rose, sharp and furious. "Find the cause. Now." Static crackled across their communications. Then, for the first time in history, a human voice broke through their signal shield. Calm, steady, and almost mocking. "This is Captain Mara Vance," she said. "I'd offer you coffee, but you seem busy." Every alien on the bridge froze. The Arbiter's claws tightened around the rail. "How is she transmitting?" he roared. "She can't. Our systems are." Then the main monitor flickered again, showing something impossible. Across the fleet, the stars shifted. Not by movement, but by light. Hundreds of small flashes appeared behind the alien ships. Tiny glimmers like sparks. Each one was a weapon, a satellite, a ghost of the old Terran defense network. And every single one of them had locked its aim on the Council fleet. In that moment, the Arbiter understood. She hadn't been wasting time. She had been aiming. And the calm on her face was not surrender. It was the smile of a predator waiting for the perfect shot. 10 seconds. Her voice echoed through the comms. "Enjoy the view." The Arbiter's eyes widened. "Shields. Raise." But it was too late. The comm had ended, and the fire was about to begin. The first flash lit up the night sky like the birth of a new star. It was silent at first. No explosion, no sound. Just a blinding light spreading across the horizon. Then the shockwave followed, deep and rolling, shaking the ground beneath the human base. Inside the command room, lights flickered, screens glowed red, and every crew member froze where they stood. Captain Mara Vance didn't move. She stood in front of the main screen, her hands resting calmly behind her back. Her face glowed in the light of the explosions dancing above the planet. Her eyes reflected fire. The Phoenix satellites had awakened. Dozens of long-lost human defense weapons were now alive, orbiting in silence. And obeying her commands, Lieutenant Rico Hale gripped the edge of the console, his heart pounding. "What did you do, Captain?" he whispered. She didn't turn around, her voice calm as ever. "I reminded the galaxy that Earth never sleeps." In orbit, the alien fleet was in chaos. Their systems were failing, shields collapsing, engines overloading. The Grand Arbiter's voice roared through every comm channel. "Find the source. Stop the interference. Now!" But no one could. The Phoenix network was too old, too hidden, too human. Built long before the Council had even formed, it operated on codes no alien AI could understand. To the machines of the Council, it was invisible, just noise. But to Mara, it was music. A song written by humanity for the day they would rise again. "Captain," Rico called out. "Their main cannons are down. Their signals are jamming themselves." "Good," Mara said softly. "That means we have their attention." She stepped closer to her console and tapped her wrist pad. The display changed, showing a glowing sphere of green lines circling the planet. "This," she said quietly, "is our transmission link." Tara frowned, confused. "What transmission? We can't send messages through the Council's block." Mara smiled slightly. "That's what they think." She pressed a single key, and deep underground, a machine older than anyone in the room came alive. It was the Helios transmitter, a relic of the first Earth defense colony. It had been buried under rock and dust for over a century. Now, under Mara's code, it began to hum. The floor shook gently, lights flickering blue as power flowed upward, and far above the planet, a beam of golden energy cut through the void, piercing the static of the universe. Rico's eyes widened. "That's not a distress signal," he whispered. "No," Mara said. "It's an invitation." "Invitation," Tara repeated. "To who?" Mara looked at her crew one by one, her expression unreadable. "To anyone still listening," she said. "To every human ship still hiding out there in the dark." Silence filled the room as the meaning sank in. They weren't fighting to survive anymore. They were calling others to rise. Far beyond the orbit, in the black sea of space, the signal spread like a ripple in water. It reached the edges of abandoned colonies, bounced off dead satellites, and somewhere, on an old freighter drifting near a shattered moon, a receiver blinked alive. A man in a torn human uniform looked up in shock. "It's her," he whispered. "Captain Vance, she's still fighting." Across the stars, one by one, old ships powered up their drives. Human beacons began to glow again. The lost were waking. Meanwhile, on the Council flagship, panic had turned into fury. The Grand Arbiter slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Trace that transmission," he roared. But the technicians shook their heads. "It's not in our system, my lord." "What do you mean not in your system?" he snapped. "It's broadcasting on primitive human bands, ancient frequencies." The Arbiter hissed. "Then block them. Shut them down." "We can't," the officer cried. "Our own sensors are looping." The alien fleet began to fragment. Ships collided as their targeting systems failed. Engines misfired. Cannons turned offline. It was chaos, a storm of confusion created by human code from centuries ago. And all the while, Mara watched calmly from her chair, her voice barely a whisper. "The ghosts of Earth still fight." The camera drones of the Council caught her image and transmitted it across the galaxy. Every species watching saw the same thing. A lone human standing against an empire, smiling while surrounded by fire. To some she looked insane, to others unstoppable. "Captain," Rico said softly, "they're going to regroup soon." Mara nodded, her tone calm but cold. "They will. And they'll come harder." "Then what's the next step?" She turned her head toward him. "The next step is to remind them why humans scare the universe." As she spoke, the Helios transmitter began to pulse faster. The signal split, sending data to every satellite in orbit. One by one, those satellites opened their weapon bays, ancient kinetic rods built from earth steel. Weapons that didn't need energy, they only needed gravity. Mara typed a short command. "Release pattern, Falcon Strike." Rico stared in disbelief. "Captain, those rods will fall straight through the fleet." "I know," she said quietly. "That's the point." Far above, the satellites fired. Dozens of glowing rods detached from orbit and fell toward the fleet. The sky lit with streaks of white fire as the rods cut through the atmosphere like arrows. The alien ships tried to dodge. Some succeeded, most didn't. The rods hit with the force of small suns, tearing ships in half. Explosions bloomed like flowers of light across the dark void. On the Council flagship, alarms screamed. The Arbiter stared at the destruction in disbelief. What kind of weapons are these?" An officer stammered. "Old human kinetic strikes. Simple metal. No energy signature." The Arbiter's voice shook with anger and fear. "They fight us with rocks?" Mara's voice echoed across the comms, soft but sharp. "Rocks fall. Empires burn." The transmission ended in static. But her message had already crossed the stars. Human fleets from distant systems were moving. The universe was beginning to change. And in the middle of it all stood one woman with an empty coffee mug, looking up at the burning sky and whispering, "Now they're listening." Smoke drifted through the sky like black ribbons twisting across the stars. The alien fleet was broken but not defeated. Half their ships burned in orbit, the rest still forming new lines. They were wounded, angry, and terrified. Yet even in chaos, the Galactic Council refused to admit defeat. Inside the Grand Flagship, lights flickered red. Alarms howled through the halls. The Grand Arbiter stood at the center of the bridge, his silver armor scorched, his voice sharp as lightning. Stabilize the formation. Reroute all remaining power to the primary cannons. His lieutenants obeyed in silence. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned a surrender countdown into a war. The Arbiter turned to the main screen. It showed the small human base on the red planet below, still standing, still silent. And there she was, Captain Mara Vance, calm as ever, her hands clasped behind her back. He narrowed his golden eyes. "How is she still alive?" he hissed. "She should be ashes by now." A trembling officer replied, "My lord, her defense systems are different. They appear to react to our targeting patterns before we even fire. It's as if they already know where we'll shoot." The Arbiter slammed his fist against the console. No machine predicts the Council. But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Down on the planet, inside the human base, everything shook with distant thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling as alien blasts struck the nearby mountains. Yet Captain Mara Vance didn't move from her command seat. Her eyes glowed in the dim red light. Around her, her crew worked in silence, their fear replaced by fierce determination. Lieutenant Rico Hale stood at her side. His uniform was torn, sweat running down his neck, but his voice was steady now. "Captain, the Phoenix satellites are down to 60% charge." "Good," she said quietly. "That's all we need." He frowned. "Captain, the enemy still has hundreds of ships. How do we fight that?" She looked up at the screen showing the burning sky and whispered, "We don't fight them head-on. We make them fight themselves." Rico stared at her, confused. Before he could ask, she turned to Tara, the young engineer. "Tara, activate MirrorNet protocol." Tara blinked. "That's experimental code, Captain. It hasn't been tested." Mara smiled faintly. "Then it's a good day for testing." Deep underground, hidden in the core of the base, ancient servers hummed. The MirrorNet was an AI defense loop. It didn't block the enemy. It copied them. It took the Council's own signals, twisted them, and sent them back, like a mirror reflecting light into the eyes of its source. Within seconds, the alien fleet's communication channels filled with false orders. Half their ships believed they were retreating. The other half believed they were under attack from their own allies. On the flagship, the Arbiter screen exploded with error messages. "Sector 5 firing on us." "No, they're returning fire." "Shut it down. Shut it down," he roared. But it was too late. Through the chaos, the humans remained silent. Every blast from one alien ship hit another. Every defense field turned against its neighbor. Inside the human base, Rico watched the radar as the alien ships began to destroy each other. His voice shook. "They're tearing themselves apart." Mara nodded. "That's what happens when you give power to machines and remove trust." He turned toward her slowly, realizing something. "You knew this would happen?" "Not knew," she said softly. "Hoped." The alien voice thundered again through the broken comm lines. 10 seconds to final purge. Prepare ultimate strike." But Mara wasn't afraid. She looked at the countdown on her console and said quietly, 9 minutes ago, they gave us a choice to surrender." She raised her wrist pad. "Now we give them a choice to remember." She pressed the command, "Falcon Strike, Phase 2. Above the planet, the remaining Phoenix satellites glowed brighter than ever. Their last energy cores burned hot, converting every fragment of stored power into raw light. They began to spin faster and faster. And then they fell. The sky cracked open with light. 1,000 beams pierced through the blackness, cutting across the alien fleet. Ships shattered like glass, flames rolling through the void. Even the flagship trembled under the shockwave. On its bridge, the Arbiter gripped the railing, shouting, "Shields! All units! Defend!" But no one could hear him anymore. His own systems were blind, deaf, and broken. Down below, the human base vibrated as debris fell from orbit. Terra covered her ears as thunder roared through the desert. Rico leaned over the console, staring at the radar. "Captain, we're winning," he said, his voice almost a whisper. But Mara didn't smile. She looked out the viewport at the burning sky, her face calm but sad. "Winning," she repeated, "always costs something." The power in the base flickered. Old circuits overloaded, sparks flying from the walls. The Phoenix network was collapsing. It had given everything it had. Rico grabbed her arm. "Captain, if those satellites detonate, we'll be caught in the blast." Mara looked at him with quiet eyes. "Then we hold the line," she said softly, "until the last second." Outside, the storm of light reached its peak. Every explosion painted the world in gold. From orbit, the human base looked like a candle in a hurricane. Small but unbroken, the alien fleet was no longer an army. It was a graveyard of fire, and in the silence that followed, only the voice of Captain Mara Vance remained. Steady, clear, unshaken. "The Council asked me to surrender in 10 minutes, she said. "I spent 9 making coffee, and 1 reminding them why humanity is feared." Her words spread through the fractured comms, carried by static and smoke. Every human ship that received it recorded it, replayed it. Across distant systems, it became a whisper, then a legend. The message of a calm woman who waited 9 minutes to light the stars on fire. As the dust settled, Rico looked at her with quiet awe. "What now, Captain?" Mara turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the fading glow of battle. "Now," she said softly, "we clean up the ashes." The night sky was no longer dark. It burned like a living flame. Red, gold, and white streaks of fire cutting through the void. The wreckage of the alien fleet glowed across the atmosphere. Broken ships tumbled like dying stars, leaving trails of smoke and light. Inside the human base, the walls shook from the impact of falling debris. Metal screamed, lights flickered, and dust rained from the ceiling. But Captain Mara Vance stood at the command deck, motionless, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Around her, the crew rushed between consoles, shouting readings and warnings. Yet her voice cut through the chaos like a calm heartbeat. "Hold positions," she said. "No one moves until I say so." Lieutenant Rico Hale stumbled toward her, his uniform covered in soot. "Captain, the outer shields are breaking. We can't take another hit." She turned her head slowly, her expression steady. "Then let them fall," she said softly. "The storm will pass soon." Her tone wasn't cold. It was certain, confident, almost peaceful. To her crew, it was maddening and comforting at the same time. Outside, the sky was fire. The final wave of Phoenix satellites exploded in the upper atmosphere. A chain reaction of light spread across the orbit like veins of lightning. It was beautiful and terrifying, the birth of victory and destruction together. The alien fleet had stopped firing. Most of their systems were gone. The few surviving ships floated helplessly, their engines silent, their lights fading. Rico gripped the console and shouted over the roar. "Captain, the power readings are going wild. The reactor can't hold this overload." Mara glanced at the monitor and smiled faintly. "It's doing what it was built to do," she said. "What's that?" Rico asked, his voice tight with fear. "End wars," she replied. The base trembled again, a deafening crack shaking the floor. Terra screamed, "We lost Shield Grid 3. We're exposed." Mara stepped forward, placing her hand on the console. "Divert the rest of the power to cooling systems." "But Captain, that's an order," she said firmly. Her eyes glowed in the red emergency light. Her reflection shimmered on the cracked glass of the viewport. Outside, fire rained down. Alien metal, fragments of ships, and burning plasma streaks. For a moment, Everything slowed down. Mara could hear nothing but the hum of the engines beneath her feet. The smell of smoke and ozone filled the air. Her coffee mug rolled off the table and shattered on the floor. She stared at it for a second, a small smile crossing her face. "Guess I'll need another cup," she whispered. Then the base shook again, harder this time. A section of the roof caved in, alarms blaring louder than ever. Rico grabbed her arm. "Captain, we have to evacuate. The structure won't survive." She pulled her arm free gently. "No one leaves until it's over," she said. Her voice calm, yet it carried command, the kind of authority that came from unshakable faith. On the alien flagship above, the Grand Arbiter struggled to stand. Half his bridge was on fire, smoke rising from shattered panels. His golden eyes burned with rage as he stared at the human signal still active on the screen. "That woman?" he hissed. "She turned our fleet into our grave." An officer collapsed beside him. "My lord, we must retreat." "There is no retreat," the Arbiter roared, slamming his clawed hand on the console. But the command never reached the other ships, because they were already gone. Back on the surface, Rico's console flashed green. "Captain, the fleet, it's retreating. They're leaving orbit." Mara didn't react. She simply exhaled. "Of course they are," she said quietly. "Fire doesn't chase ashes." Tara sank into her chair, eyes wide with disbelief. We actually won." Mara turned to her and smiled faintly. "No, Tara," she said. "We survived, that's different." Her words were soft, but they carried truth, because outside, the planet was not peaceful yet. Chunks of alien debris continued to rain down like burning meteors. The ground trembled as explosions bloomed across the desert. Rico ran to the viewing window and looked up. The night sky was alive. Not with stars, but with falling light. Each glowing streak reminded him of the humans who had died in silence before this day. "Captain," he said softly, "I don't know how you stayed so calm through all of this." Mara looked at him and replied, "Because fear never saved anyone, Lieutenant. Calm minds win wars. Angry ones only end them faster." The firestorm outside began to fade. The bright orange sky turned dark again, replaced by the pale blue of dawn. Smoke curled above the horizon as the wind whispered across the sand. For the first time in hours, the world was quiet. Rico sat on the floor beside his console, exhausted. Tara leaned against the wall, wiping tears from her eyes. But Mara stood tall, her posture strong and proud. She looked at the rising sun through the cracked glass and said softly, "Humanity is like this light. No matter how dark the night gets, we rise again." Her words lingered in the air like a promise. The crew turned to her, watching in silence. They didn't see just their captain anymore. They saw something greater, a symbol of what it meant to be human, to fight when outnumbered, to stand when the universe tells you to kneel, and to smile even when surrounded by fire. Outside, the last of the alien ships vanished into the darkness of space. The sky cleared, leaving only smoke trails behind. Mara looked down at the shattered pieces of her mug and whispered, 10 minutes, she said softly, and the universe will never forget them. The fire had finally died. Only smoke and silence remained. The red desert was covered in ash and melted glass where alien metal had fallen. The air shimmered with heat, glowing faintly as dawn broke over the horizon. For the first time in hours, the sky above was clear. No ships, no explosions, only the quiet hum of victory. Inside the ruined human base, dust hung in the air like mist. The walls were cracked, lights flickered weakly, and half the consoles were dead. But the people inside still stood, breathing, alive. Captain Mara Vance walked through the corridor slowly, boots crunching against broken glass. Her uniform was torn, her face smeared with soot, yet her posture remained straight, her steps steady. Every move she made spoke of quiet strength. Behind her, Lieutenant Rico Hale followed, his arm in a makeshift sling. Tara trailed them, carrying a small power pack that still worked. No one spoke, not yet. Words felt too heavy for the moment. All they could hear was the wind outside and the distant crackle of burning debris. When they reached the main deck, Mara stopped. The large window before them was shattered, letting in the light of the rising sun. She stared out at the endless horizon where the alien fleet had once been. Now there was nothing but empty sky. Rico stood beside her, his voice rough. "They're really gone," he said softly. She nodded. "For now," she replied, her tone calm, almost tired. But the universe never stays quiet for long. Tara looked at her, eyes full of awe. "Captain, we actually did it, didn't we?" Mara turned slightly, a faint smile forming on her lips. "No," she said. "We didn't win a war, Tara. We won 10 minutes. Rico frowned. 10 minutes. Mara looked out the window again, her voice low, steady. "That's all they gave us. To surrender, to kneel, to end humanity's story. But we used every second of it to write a new one." Silence filled the deck again. The crew looked at her, seeing something in her eyes that went beyond victory. It wasn't joy. It was something deeper, an understanding of what it had cost. Rico sat down heavily against a wall, his gaze distant. "So many people died before we even got here," he said quietly. "All those colonies, those ships, all gone." Mara didn't answer right away. She knelt beside a broken console, brushed the dust from it, and said softly, "Every flame that burns leaves ashes, Rico. But sometimes, ashes are what the next fire needs to start." Outside, the wind howled softly across the desert. The human flag, half-burned but still standing, fluttered weakly in the breeze. Mara watched it for a long moment. Her mind wandered to the countless names etched into her memory. Friends, soldiers, strangers, people who had believed that humanity still mattered, people who had fought when the galaxy said they couldn't. Tara broke the silence. "Captain, what happens now? The council will regroup, won't they?" Mara nodded slowly. "They'll rebuild, and they'll come again. But next time, they won't find us sleeping." She walked to the central console and connected her wristpad. The screen flickered to life, showing the Phoenix network map. Faded, damaged, but not dead. Several green dots still blinked faintly. Rico leaned closer, eyes widening. "Are those human ships?" "Yes," Mara said softly. The signal reached them. Far away in deep space, old human vessels were answering her call. Freighters, warships, even civilian carriers, they were gathering. Across systems once forgotten, the Phoenix symbol glowed again. The ashes of Earth were waking. The galaxy had laughed at humans for centuries. But now the laughter had stopped. Mara typed a short message into the console, her voice calm but filled with quiet fire. "This is Captain Mara Vance of the Terran Outpost. To all human survivors, Earth stands. The Council came and failed. The stars are ours to reclaim." The signal went out, carried across the void. Static at first, then strength, then silence. But somewhere out there, she knew someone was listening. Rico looked at her, admiration and disbelief mixing in his voice. "Captain, after everything, you're still fighting?" She smiled faintly. "Fighting? No, Rico. I'm just making coffee for the next round." He chuckled weakly, shaking his head. Even in the face of endless war, her calm never broke. The base's generators finally failed, plunging the room into soft twilight. Only the glow of the rising sun lit the space now. Mara stepped toward the shattered window, feeling the warmth of the dawn on her face. Her eyes reflected the golden light. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to simply exist, to feel alive. Rico joined her, standing in silence. "Do you think the Council will ever understand us?" he asked quietly. Mara looked out at the horizon. "No," she said. "And that's why they'll always lose." She turned toward him, her expression calm but fierce. "They think victory is about power, but victory is about endurance, and humans endure everything." The wind outside carried the faint sound of distant thunder. Maybe it was the storm returning, or maybe it was something else. The sound of new engines, new ships, answering her signal. Mara smiled to herself. The universe was shifting again, and humanity, once small and forgotten, had become a spark that refused to die. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone, 10 minutes. That's all they gave us. She looked up at the sky. Turns out, 10 minutes was enough to change the stars. The sun climbed higher. Its light poured through the broken window, falling on her face. Her shadow stretched long across the command deck. Strong, silent, unyielding, the shadow of a human who refused to surrender. And as the world turned, as the universe whispered her name in 1,000 tongues, the story of Captain Mara Vance began to spread. The woman who made coffee under fire, who waited 9 minutes to destroy an empire, and who taught the stars what it truly meant to be human.